probably the really important piece of all this technology, and that is the next generation, which is the millennials. The millennials, generally referred to as approximately 10 to 30 years old. They're the largest generation in American history. They outnumber the baby boomers. The key thing is that for all of this generation, they have the ability to create and maintain meaningful virtual relationships in a way that previous generations really can't, in general, understand. But it's the case. It's the first generation to have this ability. As I said, the 20 to 30-year-olds are a good example, but the 10 to 20-year-olds and their younger siblings who are growing up with iPads, with things like Webkins, Club Penguin, all of these online social worlds and virtual worlds at a very early age, we don't really know where that's going. Sometimes they joke that generation is sort of the biggest science experiment in history. But one thing I know for sure is it's creating this ability to create and maintain meaningful virtual relationships, and that's something that they will bring into the workplace. The economics of transporting people is simply going to determine that we need to do more and more virtually, and the technology for it is going to get better and better. One quick example. All of you are probably used to video conferencing, and perhaps some of you have seen sort of the next generation of video conferencing, which is called telepresence, where we use very large, high-definition screens, very realistic audio, sometimes turning a whole conference room into what is called a telepresence room. And they're strikingly good. You really begin to feel like you're in the same room with someone who may be in Hong Kong. The next step past that, though, is when telepresence becomes part of the everyday workplace. Not where it's a room you go to, but it's part of the work environment. About 20 years ago, I saw an experiment done around this concept by Xerox out in Palo Alto. And what they said is, what will it be like in the future when screens are so inexpensive, when broadband connections are so good, that we can connect to places constantly through telepresence? And they set up a lab in Palo Alto and a lab in Oregon, connected them together with sort of the ultimate telepresence system. And the best way to describe it is to describe the coffee lounge in Palo Alto. You'd walk into the coffee lounge in Palo Alto, looked like an ordinary coffee lounge, table, chairs, couch, coffee pot. And then one wall was entirely a huge video screen. And on that video screen was the coffee lounge in Oregon. Same couch, same chairs, same coffee pot, walls painted the same color, so it seemed to sort of just blend in. So you'd walk into Palo Alto, and a little body heat detector would sense you were there and ring a bell up in Oregon so people would know someone was there. You'd get your coffee and stand there. Your colleague from Oregon would come out, life size, on the screen, get their coffee, stand there, audio centered so it sounds like it's really coming from their mouth, and you'd stand there and talk to them for a little while, and then you'd wander back to your office and they'd go back to their office. Standard water cooler stuff. And this constant connectivity was extended throughout both offices. It was very complicated, very expensive. A do not try this at home experiment, at least for now. But at the end, because Xerox PARC was a research group, they did a research paper that was published. And it said that the work, a piece of work divided into two, proceeded as if all the people were in the same physical space, which I think is a profound finding. And the next generation is going to be better and better at working in those kinds of virtual environments, collaboration through virtual environments. In fact, some of the best and most talented, the ones that we really want to hire, may begin to ask us why they have to go get in the car, sit in traffic for 30 minutes to come to their cubicle to sit and IM in a text message and do video conferences with people. And we better have a pretty good answer for them. In fact, sometimes I have this fantasy that, say, 40 years from now, there's a trivia contest, and one of the questions is, what was a rush hour? And kids will find out, and they'll go, wait a minute, everyone went out and got in their cars at the same time? That's completely crazy. I realized, the importance of that to that generation a few years ago when I was running Newsweek's website. And I had a very tricky programming thing to do. I was doing an ad for Patek Philippe, the watch company. They wanted watch faces that showed the time in 5 world capitals. And they were paying a lot for it, so I said, those little watch faces better be right on time. So this was a few years ago, but even then, you could go out on the internet and set the clock by the atomic clock in Colorado. That was just starting to be done. So I called in my programmer at Newsweek in New York, who was 20, early college graduate, brilliant kid, has gone on to a great career. Told him what I wanted to do, but it was a little early days for this. So he said, you know, I've never done that myself. Can I hire a freelancer to help? And I said, sure, go ahead. Don't break the bank, but yeah, use your judgment. So he went out, came back 2 weeks later, had the app done, ran behind the ad, pinged the atomic clock, really nice. Said, gee, I'd like to meet the guy who did this. And he said, I don't think that's going to be possible. And I said, why not? And he said, well, he kind of lives in Moscow. And I said, Moscow, Russia? And he said, well, yeah, you told me to get the best price. And I went out on the internet and he had the best price, so I hired him. And then it struck me. I said, how did we pay this fellow? And he said, well, he wanted American dollars and cash. So you know that sealed pouch that goes from Newsweek headquarters to our Moscow bureau every day? I just put it in there and he came in and picked it up. And I said, oh my God. Glad I didn't know about that. We probably violated some currency restrictions there. But what an amazing thing to think. You're 20 years old. Your boss says, this is really important. Don't screw this up. You go out, you not only hire someone who lives in Moscow, you figure out how to pay them as well. You know, with luck, those will be our next employees. It's important to keep in mind that this generation is the first to really deal with what should be a virtual relationship, what should be a real relationship, and what is the balance. And they're struggling to find out. I was recently speaking to a group of Fortune 500 HR executives. We had a long talk about millennials and their comfort with the virtual world. And afterwards, one of the HR directors came up to me and said, you know, we're starting to see college graduates with good degrees, good grades, who have spent 4 years in college and almost never left their dorm rooms. Because we've done such a good job of putting everything in college online, tests, libraries, classes. In fact, some state universities now overbook auditoriums and hope that some of the students will stay away and just do things in their dorm rooms. But the HR executive said, so we're starting to see some behavior issues, and we're beginning to think that we're going to have remedial social skills class. She said, we already teach remedial business writing in some cases, but remedial social skills. And I said, what does that mean? She said, well, obvious things like when to IM and when to text and when to talk to someone in person. I said, yeah. And she said, and how to start a conversation, how to know a conversation is over. And at first I was really quite freaked out, right? But then she said, listen, these kids are also bringing remarkable abilities to do online collaboration, right? We've always mentored younger workers. This is just another kind of mentoring. Well, maybe so. We'll see how it works.